You've been expanding your factory, pushing further, and then you stumble across it, your first crude oil field. It feels important, but you're not quite sure what to do with it. How do you extract it? How do you process it? And what's the right way to turn this mysterious liquid into something your factory can actually use? Suddenly, you're faced with new machines, new fluids, heavy oil, light oil, petroleum gas, and you're left wondering how it all fits together. What's the best way to process oil? How much petroleum can I really get from crude oil if I do it right? In this video, we're going to break it all down and show you how to unlock the full potential of your oil fields. When you're starting out in Factorio, crude oil isn't something you need to worry about right away. In the early game, your focus will mostly be on mining iron, copper, and coal to build up your factory. But as you move into the mid-game, crude oil suddenly becomes a key resource you can't ignore. On its own, crude oil isn't all that useful. In its raw form, the only thing you can really do with it is use it as ammunition for flamethrower turrets, but even then, it's not the best choice. Crude oil used directly deals the lowest possible damage for flamethrowers, making it a pretty inefficient option. Where crude oil really shines is when you process it. It becomes the starting point for creating advanced liquids like petroleum gas, light oil, and heavy oil. And this is where crude oil becomes truly essential. Processing crude oil unlocks some of the most critical parts of the game, things like red circuits, blue circuits, modules, and even space exploration. Without it, your factory simply can't grow into the late game. So where does crude oil actually come from? If you look around your map, you'll spot oil fields. These appear as dark purple patches scattered across the landscape. To extract crude oil from these fields, you need to set up pump jacks. These machines are essential for pulling the oil out of the ground. Just remember, pump jacks need electricity to keep running, so make sure they're connected to a power grid. Once you start pumping the oil, you can't just leave it flowing around. You need to store it, and that's where storage tanks come in. They safely hold large amounts of crude oil until you're ready to transport it and process it later on. One thing that's really important to understand about oil fields is that they never fully run out. However, the amount of crude oil you can extract from them does decrease over time as you keep pumping. Each oil field has an initial yield which is shown as a percentage. For example, you might see an oil field with a yield of 90% or 115%. This percentage tells you how much productive the yield is when you first start extracting. Now, here is how it works. Each percent represents 300 pump jack cycles. After every 300 cycles, the yield of that oil field will drop by 1%. This slow decline continues until the oil field reaches its minimum yield, which is either 20% or 20% of its initial value, whichever is higher. So let's go through a couple of examples to make this clearer. If an oil field starts at 90%, 20% of 90 is 18%. Since 18% is less than the 20% minimum, this oil field will stop decreasing once it reaches 20%. But if the initial yield is 115%, then 20% of 115 is 23%. In this case, the oil field will never drop below 23% because that's higher than the flat 20% minimum. Now, how much oil are you actually getting per pump jack cycle? It's pretty simple. You take the yield percentage and multiply it by 10. So for a 115% yield, you'd calculate 1.15 times 10, which means the pump jack will extract 11.5 units of oil per second. And no matter what, even when the yield drops to its lowest point, an oil field will never produce less than 2 units of oil per second. Remember, it cannot yield less than 20%, and 0.2 times 10 gives 2 units. Once you've started pumping crude oil, the next step is to process it, but this comes with a bit of challenge. Oil fields are usually scattered across the map, often far away from your main base. It might seem like a good idea at first to build oil processing setups directly at each oil field, but this approach quickly becomes inefficient. Managing multiple processing sites can drain your resources, make expansion harder, and complicate your logistics. A much better and more efficient solution is to centralize your oil processing in a single location, ideally in your main base. By doing this, you keep all your advanced infrastructure like refineries and chemical plants close together, which makes your factory easier to manage, expand, and defend. Instead of building separate setups everywhere, it's smarter to focus on transporting the crude oil from those remote oil fields back to your base. You can use pipelines if the distance isn't too far, or trains if you need to bring in oil from across the map. This centralized system not only saves you resources, but also keeps your factory running smoothly as you head towards mid and late game. When your oil fields are far from your base, trains become the most efficient and reliable way to transport crude oil over long distances. Pipelines work well for short routes. but over large areas, they can be tricky to build and maintain, especially when you start expanding across the map. Trains are faster, more scalable, and easier to manage in the long run. But since crude oil is a liquid, you can't transport it using regular cargo wagons. Instead, you need to use fluid wagons. These special train cars are designed to carry liquids like crude oil. To actually move the oil into and out of the fluid wagons, you need to set up pumps. Inserters won't work with fluids, so pumps are the only way to transfer liquids. You need pumps at both the loading station near your oil fields and at the unloading station back at your base. Pumps quickly move the oil from storage tanks into the wagons when loading, and from the wagon back into storage tanks when unloading. As you scale up, you also need to think carefully about how much storage space you have in your base. Each fluid wagon can carry up to 50,000 units of crude oil. If you're using a train with 4 wagons, that's 200,000 units of oil per trip. That's a lot of oil to handle all at once. Storage tanks in Factorio can each hold 25,000 units of liquids. This means you need at least 8 storage tanks just to fully unload one 4-wagon trains without causing the system to back up. It's often a good idea to build extra storage beyond the minimum so your trains can unload quickly, even if your processing facilities aren't consuming oil fast enough. Planning ahead for both your transport and your storage will keep your crude oil supply running smoothly and prevent traffic jams, delays, or production slowdowns later on. Once the crude oil arrives at your base, it's time to process it. This is done in an oil refinery, which is where the crude oil is broken down into more useful products. As you progress, you also use chemical plants to further process the advanced oils into even more complex materials like plastic, sulfur, and explosives. When it comes to processing crude oil, you have 2 main recipes to choose from: basic oil processing and advanced oil processing. Let's start with basic oil processing. This is the simplest method and the one you'll usually start with when you first unlock oil refining. It only requires crude oil, nothing else. In return, it produces petroleum gas, which is essential for crafting things like plastic and sulfur. However, with basic processing, that's all you get. It's a quick and easy setup, but you're not getting the full potential out of your crude oil just yet. Later, you'll unlock advanced oil processing. This method is a bit more complex because it requires both crude oil and water. This means your refinery setup will need to be connected to a water source, which adds another layer of planning to your factory design, but the extra effort is worth it. Advanced oil processing is far more efficient. It produces petroleum gas, heavy oil, and light oil all at the same time. These additional products are essential for crafting solid fuel, lubricant, and eventually rocket fuel, key components you need as you push towards the late game and space exploration. While advanced oil processing takes a little bit more setup, it's the method you rely on for the rest of your factory's life. Let's take a closer look at the 3 key products you get from oil processing: petroleum gas, heavy oil, and light oil. Each of them plays an important role in your factory's growth. Petroleum is the main resource you'll get from oil, and is something you need in huge quantities throughout the game. It's especially important because it's required to produce sulfur and, more importantly, plastic. Plastic is a vital material used in many recipes, but its biggest role is in producing red circuits or advanced circuits. These red circuits are used everywhere in the mid and late game, especially in modules, blue science, and high-tech productions. As your factory grows, your demand for red circuits, and therefore petroleum, will skyrocket. Heavy oil has a few important uses. First, it can be used as ammunition for flamethrower turrets, dealing 5% more damage than crude oil, making it a better choice for base defense. But its main purpose is to produce lubricant. Lubricant is made in a chemical plant and is a key ingredient for the express belt system, including blue belts, splitters, and underground belts, which greatly speeds up your factory's transport lines. It's also a key ingredient for the electric engine unit, which is essential for building logistic and construction robots. This is your gateway to automation with bots. Heavy oil can also be converted into light oil using a chemical plant. This is useful for 2 main reasons. It prevents your heavy oil storage from backing up and stopping production, and it's a great way to increase your light oil production if you ever need more. Light oil also has several important uses. Like heavy oil, it can be used as flamethrower turrets ammunition, but with a 10% damage boost over crude oil. So if you're using flamethrower for defense, light oil is the most efficient fuel. Even more importantly, light oil is a key ingredient for crafting rocket fuel. Rocket fuel is essential for launching rockets and progressing towards space exploration, making light oil a crucial part of your late-game supply chain. Light oil can also be converted into petroleum gas in a chemical plant, just like heavy oil can be cracked into light oil. This cracking system is useful for two big reasons. First, it keeps your oil system flowing by preventing storage backups. If your heavy or light oil tanks get full, it can block your oil refineries from working and producing any of those two oils and petroleum. Converting these oils into petroleum helps avoid this. Secondly, it provides a backup way to produce more petroleum gas if needed, and most of the time, petroleum gas will be your most heavily used liquid, so having a way to top it up by cracking heavy and light oil is incredibly helpful. This creates a smart flow where you can convert heavy oil into light oil, then convert light oil into petroleum gas, and keep your storage tanks balanced. The only time this system might get blocked is if your petroleum gas storage fills up completely. That's why it's important to not convert too much light and heavy oil into petroleum and keep a reasonable amount stored. This can be achieved by setting up a condition with a circuit network so your chemical plants stop processing those oil below a threshold. When you compare basic oil processing to advanced oil processing, the difference in efficiency is huge. Advanced oil processing is by far the better option. Not only does it produce more petroleum gas, 55 units compared to just 45 units from basic processing, but it also gives you heavy oil and light oil as valuable byproducts. The best part is, the only extra resource it requires is water, which is unlimited and easy to supply once you connected your refinery to a nearby water source. So even though advanced oil processing is a bit more complex to set up, the payoff is well worth it. But you might be wondering, how much petroleum can you really get if you fully process and crack everything? Let's break it down step by step. When you process 100 units of crude oil using advanced oil processing, you immediately get 55 units of petroleum gas along with 25 units of heavy oil and 45 units of light oil. The heavy oil doesn't go to waste. You can crack those 25 units of heavy oil into light oil, which adds to another 18.75 units of light oil to your total. So now you're working with 63.75 units of light oil in total. That's the original 45 units from the refinery, plus the 18.75 units gained from cracking the heavy oil. But we can take it even further. This light oil can also be cracked into petroleum gas. So from 63.75 units of light oil, you can produce an additional 42.5 units of petroleum gas. When you add everything together, you end up with 55 units of petroleum gas from the initial processing, plus 42.5 units from cracking the light oil. This gives you a total of 97.5 units of petroleum gas from just 100 units of crude oil. So, with advanced oil processing and full cracking, you can convert 97.5% of your crude oil into petroleum gas. This makes it by far the most efficient way to process oil, helping you get the absolute most out of your resources as your factory grows. And that's everything you need to know to get started with crude oil and oil processing in Factorio, from finding oil fields to transporting crude oil to maximizing your petroleum output. It all plays a crucial role in pushing your factory towards the mid and late game. If you find this guide helpful, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more Factorio videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.